Without the Higgs field, the universe may not have any protons at all. So this tiny 1% mass contribution turns out to be responsible for 100% of the universe we happen to have.
This is an excerpt from an excellent video done by Arvin. I have to give credit for him first. And what he's talking about here is the theory of Higgs field with a beautiful definition and explanation about the mass that refers in the scientific or the physics world. So it is very interesting, and then when I was listening to it, I can relate most of the section that he is referring to along with my own experience, and then connecting that to the dependent origination that Buddha has mentioned. So when he said that tiny 1% of the mass responsible for the whole universe, it's reminded me that my previous episode I was talking about the gravitational force is similar to our craving, as Buddha mentioned, because that craving is the primary force for the dependent origination. I can relate to that. So bear with me on this interesting analysis of this theoretical physics, which is getting closer to Buddha's teaching. If you can remember, I mentioned that the dependent origination is an occurrence in this universe every millisecond in every part of this universe. And then it's at a very subtler level. So this is something similar to what this theoretical physics is trying to explain in mathematical formula. Like Einstein mentioned that E equal mc square, where that m equals like an energy, m is a mass, but it is kind of energy, and then it's convert with the speed of light, it brings the apparent energy, which is E. So important element of this Einstein's theory of E equal mc square is that m, the mass. So that is what this Higgs theory is going to explain. And then, so here I would like you to listen to this part of the explanation first.
Where does the mass of your body come from? Well, the mass comes from all the atoms in your body that individually have a mass. Where does an atom's mass come from? Well, this is interesting because the mass of atoms at its core is really energy. In fact, all mass is energy. This is exemplified in Einstein's famous mass-energy equivalence equation, E equals mc squared. Mass is interchangeable with energy, and the constant c squared, or speed of light squared, is the conversion factor. So where is the energy of the atom coming from? Well, 99% of the mass of an atom is contained in the binding energy within the nucleus. This energy is a result of one of the four fundamental forces of nature, called the strong force, which keeps the protons and neutrons glued together in the nucleus of atoms. That's where most of your body's so-called mass resides.
Here, my intuition tells me that they are referring to our liveliness as mass, because the liveliness is the one that really keep on us glued together in this body, if you think about the body, because once we die, that liveliness goes away and this matter part of this body will just remain, but it doesn't have any kind of a liveliness or any kind of a energy or that subtler level mass anymore.
If mass is energy, then what is the mechanism that confers this energy to these fundamental particles? This is where the Higgs field comes into the picture. This field is everywhere in space-time, but most explanations of how this field confers mass can't avoid getting highly technical, talking about symmetry breaking and other advanced mathematical concepts.
Don't worry, I'm not going to explain that complex mathematical theory here because it's very simple. To me, what they're talking about is our cognitive field, which is being theorized by saying it's Higgs field.
So when a fundamental particle interacts with the Higgs field, it gains an energy or intrinsic mass. Without the Higgs field, for example, the electron would be massless, like photons, and travel at the speed of light. However, since the electron is coupled to a field with positive value everywhere in the universe, individual electrons are constantly interacting with this Higgs field.
So that is the key point, because this liveliness is everywhere in this universe. So that is what Buddha has explained in that dependent origination, and it is occurrence in everywhere in this universe. So keep in mind that liveliness or that mass that he's referring to is the key point here. Also, as Irvin said, this Higgs field is the one that coupling all the other fields in this universe, like our cognitive field is the one really perceiving whole this universe. But here I am connecting the dots with the experiential insight, as you can notice. So we could actually feel this. We don't need to go to the theoretical or complex theories and then conceptualize this. With my meditation practices, I always refer to this as your awareness or your attention. Some spiritual teachers refers to this as consciousness, but in Buddha's term, this is called vijnana, which is the third link of the dependent origination. So in Buddha's teaching, actually, not just observing this, but he mentioned that how it's actually created as well, like the actual cause for this particular field. And on the fifth link of the dependent origination, he's talked about this six senses or the salayatana, which will give that attraction or excitation as boson. That boson impact is that our thirst or our real clingingness that's coming through this Higgs field and then interact with all other fields as explained in this part of the clip.
Let's imagine for a minute as if there were no Higgs field. If we then took any of the fields and put them inside an empty box, like the electron field, and if we then weighed that box, we would find that box would have no weight. In other words, the field would have no mass, even though the virtual electrons would be present throughout it. Similarly, all the other fields of the standard model would also have no mass inside the empty box, just quantum fluctuations. But here's the big kicker. There's an exception to this rule, the Higgs field. It's unique because the Higgs field in empty space, unlike every other field, has a net positive mass. Its mass is not zero in empty space. If we were to weigh the box with the Higgs field inside, it would have a weight. The Higgs field in empty space has a mass. This is called the vacuum energy. A more technical term for this is the vacuum expectation value, VEV, of the Higgs field. It is non-zero energy. And since energy and mass are equivalent, the form this interaction energy takes is indistinguishable from the form of energy associated with a rest mass.
Here again, I can picture all the individual parts of the dependent origination fits into this explanation. I can come to those details in a different episode, but here what we need to understand for this discussion that without the Higgs field, none of the other fields has any energy. So it's just like saying that really without our clingingness or without our desire, nothing will actually exist. Our clingingness or the desire is the actual gravitational force for this whole universe, as Buddha was explaining on that Cosmos Sutra. So, because of that clingingness, which translate into that boson impact or that excitation, which has a similar quotation as well, in the sense that when you say excitation, it's kind of our urge or our longing or our kind of clingingness. So, kudos to all scientists who picked up this particular word of excitation, which is much similar to our urge or our thirst that we wanted to cling to this whole universe. This is similar to that what we think we are as our body and mind because of our craving to our body and mind. So instead of, if you focus on your cognitive field, which is according to this as the Higgs field, you are separate. But since you cling to this body and mind, you become inseparable. That's what I got it from this explanation. And not only that, you are inseparable from this universe because, as this explanation revealed, that this Higgs field is everywhere in the universe. So, just similarly, that the dependent origination is occurring everywhere in this world, and then you are connected with this world with your that interaction or your clingingness to your body, your mind, and your surrounding, and to your this world and to this whole universe. If you can detach that interaction or that clingingness, you will contract this whole universe.
Model that have mass, such as electrons, quarks, and W and Z bosons, are coupled to the Higgs field, while the fields of massless particles, like photons and gluons, are not. So why are some particles coupled? Meaning, why do some particles interact with the Higgs field while others do not? We're not sure. This just appears to be the way the universe works. The photon happens to be one of the particles that does not interact with the Higgs field, and so it remains massless and moves at the speed of light. The mechanism of the Higgs field giving out mass to other particles is called symmetry breaking. This is a complex subject, but if you want to know more about symmetry breaking, I made a video about it right up here. Now, I should add a note about neutrinos. The standard model predicts that they should be massless, but measurements seem to indicate that they do have a very tiny mass. We don't know the origin of this mass. It could be that they also interact with the Higgs, but no one really knows for sure.
As you may know, Buddha has explained all these unknown factors in his sermon of Abhidhamma, where he talked about all this universe, how it's been divided into very tiny particles or non-particles, as theoretical physicians are now getting closer to identify them and observe from a different angle. But this need to be experienced, as Buddha mentioned. So then you don't need all these massive instrument to measure this. You will realize by yourself.
In a universe with no Higgs field, a massless electron would have an infinite radius, meaning no atoms would form at all. In addition, differences in particle mass are also responsible for the decay of free neutrons to protons. This is called beta decay. Without the Higgs field, the universe may not have any protons at all. So this tiny 1% mass contribution turns out to be responsible for 100% of the universe.
There we go. If I paraphrase this in Buddha's term, with that single, very subtler level clinging or that longing is responsible for this universe. So, in other words, if you let go of that clinging, this universe will disappear. On my previous episode, I mentioned about this as singularity that Dr. Frank Tipler was explaining, where that there is no time, no space, no nothing. So that means if you don't have that clinging or that subtler level longing to be with this existence, let go of that craving, tanha, you will stop this process of dependent origination and liberate from all the chaos coming through this universe and live blissfully until you die.